presentation and with Monday's engineering presentation. That's because Expo follows certain rules. All the Expo templates are, of course, available on the exposcience.co.za website. So let's start. And I'm trying to start and I'm stuck, Lyndon. See, this is what happened earlier today. It worked. Now I'm stuck. Oh, there we go. Right.
There we go.
Thank you. We're talking about social sciences type of Expo projects. So this information is taken literally from the Expo guidebooks. So social sciences are not the same as scientific investigation or engineering or maths or computer projects, because they are very much about humans, how humans behave, human society, relationships, and other social issues. Another difference is that the data that's collected could be quantitative, in other words, numerical, or it could be qualitative, in other words, records of interviews and so on. So what are social science projects about? They're looking at problems in human society. That's really it. And from the learner point of view, I reckon that's where they started. Now, this type of project can be done in any category, but the social sciences type of Expo project is usually done in the social science category, category 13. Keep this page in mind as we go through the details of the project, because it's all about the people. Okay, so here's a flow diagram I found on the steps of a social sciences research project. So the first couple of rows are basically about the research plan, which is called here a research proposal, in other words, from a university. So the question the learner started with, the literature they reviewed, the theory behind what they are researching, and then, of course, the design of the operation of the actual project. The research method, in other words, how are they going to get data, and how are they going to get hold of people to get the data from them? And that's all the research proposal, or in our words, research plan. Then the report, obviously the details coming of both of these, is very much about the actual project. So testing possibly on a smaller group, a pilot group, and then going to a much larger group, and I'll address that today, collecting all the information, analyzing it, and obviously finalizing the report. So what's a regional Expo project? I think we know this. Now we're talking about only selected learners. So the learners who were selected from the district Expo are doing the regional Expo project. So that's why I've put selected learner or a pair of selected learners. Okay, so social sciences projects. I'm trying to address as much as possible the projects that we're talking about today. They'll have a report, a journal, a poster, but possibly in the case of social science projects, there'll be an appendix file of all the survey questionnaires, every single one, consent forms, copies of interviews, etc., because this file is the evidence that the project was actually done. Now, let's say a learner did a survey questionnaire in WhatsApp. There's still a way of printing that questionnaire and putting the Excel spreadsheet generated from the questionnaires into the appendix. So this is where a judge would look and say, okay, did this child really do this project? Or children, let me look. And then, of course, there's the separate Expo folder, also sometimes referred to as an admin folder. And it's got documents in it that you can see there. And of course, I'm going to be talking about all of them today. Let's just look at an Expo project. Now, this is a scientific investigation one, but it's really complete and it's nice to see. You can see the Expo logo in the middle of the poster board. There's a unique number on the right. Below the Expo logo is the title of the project. And then you can see all the poster pages are A4. In this case, they're all landscape, because that is a rule of Expo, that the pages have to be A4 and you either do landscape or portrait. I'll show you another one with portrait. In this project, there was a model, unlikely in a social sciences project. And then on the table are the journal, the Expo folder, and the report. And you can see this is basically what the project's going to look like. So let's have a look at a little bit more detail. Now, the learners right now are filling in entry forms with your help teachers. And the idea is they're filling a title of a maximum of 10 words. That title is the same on the entry form and the poster and the report and the journal. Please encourage your learners about this, or tell them. It's very important that the judge actually, when they come and find the project, they actually see that it's actually that project that's listed on the program booklet. And the learners can't now go inside to change it. It causes huge issues. And amongst something like that, a judge might say, they're not really impressed if the learner's gone and changed things. Okay, so here's a social science project from last year. You can see the pages on this poster are portrait. Again, all portrait. You can also see that the main graphics on this poster are graphs. And I'll address that later because photos of people shouldn't be here. On the table, you can see 3 sets of documents: the report, the journal, the Expo folder, and possibly the appendix folder. I can't open it right now because it was one of last year's projects. Okay, so there's some interesting information that teachers and learners must remember. What the judges are looking for is who did the project. That's called authenticity. Now, where do they find this? They find this in the journal and when they ask you questions in the interview. So it's really important that the questions are there, the work is there, the journal shows who did it, and the interview, they're going to ask you questions in such a way that you can't escape admitting that you did this project. Reminder, please, second bullet, that there's no copying allowed at all. And this could happen in the research plan and the report, especially with the introduction and the discussion. Please make sure everything is referenced. All sources of information and help offered are referenced, and this is relevant to the research plan and to the report. And I'll address a lot of this later. There are a lot of learners who use AI. This is relevant to the research plan and the report, and I will address what you can and what you can't use. Please, everybody, all parts of the project must be typed up, except the journal, which can be handwritten. Now, at the district expos, there were quite a lot of handwritten projects, handwritten posters. That was fine at the district expo, but not at the regional. When you're preparing for the expo, please prepare for assessment in the social sciences category. Remember human behavior, human needs, social issues, and also stick to your project type, which is also human behavior, human needs, and human issues. So when you're preparing, you need to think about that as well. Okay, we've done one upgrade already, but today is the second one of the different types of projects. So make absolutely certain the things in bold: the folder, the report, the journal, the poster, and if relevant, the appendix file are all ready in hard copy for Expo. So you do not take your computer to show anything. It's all got to be printed. The Expo folder, there are so many different lists. We will send out the order of the filing of the documents, because that does actually get looked at by the project approval team and by the judges. Please note that there are permission and supervision letters that should be there if there's a problem with the learner ethics checklist. Okay, let's just look at the journal. So it can be handwritten or typed and printed just before Expo, but again, must be in hard copy as a separate document on the table. Each entry or page has a date. In other words, the beginning of the project was your first date, and you'll date it, including today, until just before Expo. So what does a journal show? It shows what you did, when you did it, who you spoke to, and what help you got. And what you did could be not just choose a topic, it could be your rough results of your testing, of your survey. It could be how you worked out the questionnaire, what things you read up, what sources of information you read up, and so on. The judges do look at it and it gets marks. And I'll go through the marks much later. So it's really, really worth bringing it with you on the day that you drop off your project for pre-judging. Okay, let's look at the research plan, commonly called the RP. Now, because it was a plan written at the beginning of the project, of course, it was written in the future tense. You know, the plan is to find out if learners study better with classical music or rock music. There we go. It's written in the third person. There's no I or we. It's a maximum of 4 pages long. It's not the report. It's the research plan. Now, you know it's specific to the type of project. So there is a social sciences research plan template. And at the end of the research plan, there is a minimum of 3 correctly referenced sources of information. Those 3 can be transferred to the report, but they're insufficient at the end. Now, because it's a research plan, there are no photos, no results, okay? The only exception might be if there's a sketch of a device in a different type of project, but not in social sciences. It must be typed, signed and dated by your teacher and mentor, and you can print it back to back in black and white. It's not something that you put alone on the countertop. Of course, you put it in the Expo folder. Let's look at a social sciences research plan. These are the subheadings over the 4 pages. So there's an introduction, subdivided into the literature review of those 3 sources of information, a problem statement, a research question, which you change into a hypothesis, and there are variables. Then under the method, it's how you are going to go about doing the project, the procedure, and how you're going to analyze the data. Now, in the social sciences research plan, the ethics plays a very big role because you are working with humans. That's just a brief way of looking at it. So there must be statements about how to keep data anonymous, how to get permission for research on a school campus, for example, and so on. Then there's about the safety of the people involved, including the person who's doing the project, the time frame, and of course the 3 references. Now, most people did their research plan in January or February, so this is just a review of your social sciences research plan. Let's go to the learner ethics checklist. This is done together with the research plan. It's not a separate thing, okay? It comes as a 2-page blank document, and obviously the learner will fill their name at the top of the first page. Now, if nothing on the sheet applies to the project, then there are no ethical violations and no X's, but it's unlikely because social science projects are about humans. So if you're talking to humans, surveying minors at school, doing pre and post tests in an education project, then there will be at least 1 X on the learner ethics checklist, and that's called an ethical violation. Apologies. Now, we gave all the schools the option to get help on this before the district expo. Unfortunately, There's no more help available as the teams are now preparing for the regional in a month's time. So please request help. If you are unsure, I'll tell you who to ask later, just to get help with what to do, not to check the project anymore. Unfortunately, it's too late. Then all of the learner ethics checklist is printed. If the learners got the ethics letter by the district expo, that must be printed and put into the folder, along with the signed and dated supervision letters or permission letters. And teachers, this information has been put on the WhatsApp group, the teacher WhatsApp group, many times. So the templates are all there. Right. What about the abstract? Now, this is a completely new document. It's done right at the end of the project. So it's one of the last things you do. It's written in the past tense. It's only words. No pictures, no photos, no sketches, nothing. It's a maximum of a 250-word summary of your project, and I would suggest you do a word count. Just stick to that 250 words. There are some headings. We'll look on the next slide. The judges, however, like the abstract very much because they often start what you think is the end of the project. They often start by reading the abstract because it gives them a synopsis, a summary of your project. Let's have a look. These are the subheadings: the purpose of your project, the method or procedure, the key, the most important results, the ones you want the judges to take note of, the discussion and the conclusion. So all the subheadings and the content makes 250 words, and there is a template for it. Please use the Expo templates. Right, let's look at the plagiarism form. This is also found in the Expo folder, and it's basically about the learners saying that they did the project themselves, and they understand that if they refer to other people's work, they reference it. Now, this is really, really important because the judges need to know that the learners did the project, not that they copied it, that they did it. So I've just put some key points there, which would be plagiarism. So we don't want plagiarism, so we don't want copying. We don't want direct paraphrasing, just shortening the paragraph. That's like copying. Please acknowledge every single source of information. Use your own photos and graphs. That's actually the way to prevent a lot of plagiarism, is to do just your own work. But you might want to, when you do the discussion, compare your results to other people's work. Then, of course, the referencing is vital. Now, the use of AI, I've just added that here because it's plagiarism if you use AI without acknowledgement. You can use AI in an Expo project, but only on a small scale. For example, to check your spelling. You can't ask for the discussion to be written or the whole report or the poster to be generated. That is wholesale plagiarism. Please reference the use of AI correctly. So there is a format, teachers. We have a document. I know Cape Town, they've been sent. I'm not sure in the other regions, but we can get that to the RSFDs to send out. You need to actually reference the use of AI. And please don't be tempted to get AI, whatever it is, to make your reference list, because that's the easiest thing to check. Just check one. And if it's incorrect and AI has a bad reputation for making up references, then you will be in trouble. You don't want this, obviously. Okay, let's look at the most important part of your project, the report. This counts 76 marks, 3/4 of your marks. So this is the key part of your project. The rest of it is a smaller part. This is the most important part. Now, the judges will look at your report during pre-judging. In other words, when you're not there. So you put your project up, then the judges will spend a lot of time looking at your whole project, but mainly your report. And there is an assessment sheet, a specific one for social science projects, and they will use that assessment sheet, I'm going to talk about it all today, to check your report. Because your report is written after you finished your project, it's written in the past tense in the third person. It can be any length, but it's probably going to be many more than 10 pages because you're going to put every table, every graph, every relevant photo into that report. This is the biggest document. You must use a cover page, please, and you must have a contents page and page numbers. And please format pages. In other words, a sentence doesn't go at the bottom of one page and the next half of it on the next page. Make sure the font size is consistent. The subheading size is consistent. It's a way of showing that you are very, very organized. Now you're going to have a lot more than 3 references because those 3 came from the research plan. Now you need to expand your introduction and compare your results. So you're going to have more than 3 references. Here's an example of the cover page. This comes from the Expo template. Please make sure it's there using those subheadings. And then, of course, you can add your theme to the bottom or the top of the cover page, that like those guys did with the desalination project. Obviously, it's Western Cape, the province, and the region will be one of the 4 regions. Now, a contents page, you can generate it in Windows. This is part of a social science project done a few years ago about menstrual cups. She got to page 42 on the one contents page, and there were probably another 10 pages to finish her project. Now you can see how extensive a report can be. So this was her report on her project. And while I don't want you to copy it because it's obviously specific to her project, you can actually see how it's so easy for a judge to find the right page. So maybe they want to go and see errors and limitations, for example, or they want to go and see future research because that'd be quite a nice place to ask questions. Immediately they can see that future research was on page 30. And therefore, this is very helpful to you as a learner, but also to the judges. Okay, here is the big page, the subheadings of the report. Now, Zara, the previous page, the person who did the menstrual cup project, she had subsections on her report, but here are the main headings. We're going to address them today. While you write your report, please look at the most important things of your report, because those are the things the judges are also going to pick up. They're going to say, oh, this looks interesting. I want to know more about this. And that means they're going to generate questions from your report. You can do the same thing, and you can use that to help you prepare for your interview. So all assessment forms, all 4 types of assessment forms look the same at the top. So while it could be called a judging form, it's officially called an assessment form. So you will see the judges will fill this and you won't see them like you did some of the forms at the District Expo. You won't see this. This belongs to the judges and to Expo. So the names of the learners, their project title, remember 10 words max in total. Their grade, the region will be whichever Western Cape region you are in, the category, and you will get that unique project number. Then you can see that up to 100, we've got an introduction worth 12, a method worth 16, results, discussion, and conclusion, a quarter of the marks, in fact, slightly more, 28, originality, creativity, value 12, written presentation 8. So points 1 to 5 are assessed during pre-judging, and then point 6 is assessed during the interview, and that totals up to 100. Then the judge will give their own mark, and you should have 2 judges or more. And then the group will get together and discuss the mark and may slightly adjust it into a final score. Then the judge and the convener, who's a manager, will sign their names and write the date. Now, right at the bottom, let's have a look. Each item below is worth 4. Obviously, you, as a very good Expo participant, are aiming for 4 out of 4 all the time. Okay, naught, not done, no evidence, very bad, incorrect. Nobody, I'm sure, at Expo wants 0. 1, done but not very well and very little. Can you imagine if you did an introduction of 5 lines? You would probably get a 1 for your introduction. 2 is the middle, it's average. It was not really good, but not bad. Good is you follow all the instructions, and of course, excellent is you do much more than what's expected. So learners, you can look at this and you can say to yourself, I'm obviously aiming for, let's say you're aiming for 80%, a gold medal. Therefore, you've got to aim to do very well in every single section of the assessment sheet. Okay, let's start with the actual report, the introduction. This is very similar to the paragraphs for the other types of projects. You are telling your story now about your project, just like an essay introduction. You will obviously define some concepts which are relevant to social sciences and to your project. Do you see how I said, keep in mind you're doing a social science project? Obviously mention your background reading and literature there. And then you're talking about who's going to benefit from your project. Are you sending your results to the city of Cape Town? Are you sharing your results with somebody at UWC? That's the kind of significance we're looking for. And put this into your introduction. Why are you doing this? What's interesting? What's so interesting that made you choose this project? Now, you also have to refer to work that's already been done. That might be in the literature search. Okay, so you discovered that you did this project and now you found a project that's very similar. There is the place where you would say, okay, there is another project, but they chose to look at this and I'm doing that, or we're doing that, to make your project unique. And then the last line is so important. What is different? What is new? What is novel? What is innovative about your project? So remember, all of these should be covered somewhere in your introduction. Let's have a look at the marks. Now, learners, you can use the assessment sheet, and teachers, I'll show you where to find it. You can use the assessment sheet as a checklist. You could also do it in this order. You could write your report in this order so that it makes it easy for a judge to find the different parts of your introduction. So the key concepts are those relative to social sciences and to your project. And of course, you then review the literature. You would identify the problem, the issue, the phenomenon. You would set out the aim or purpose, state the research question and the hypothesis and variables. Now, each of these becomes almost like a little subheading. Notice that there could be 2 things together for 4 marks. So problem, issue, phenomena, purpose, aim is 4 marks max. So your goal, learners, is to make sure you cover all of this and more. So you're aiming for 4 out of 4 each time. So you can see that the introduction is worth 12. Let's look at the method. Again, this is very much about social science projects, not so general anymore. So what methodology did you use to get information or data? Did you do experiments? Did you do surveys? Did you do interviews? Okay. Keep everything, refer to everything in your method, in your description of your method. By the way, the method will be longer than you did on the research plan. So be careful of just copying the method from the research plan. It's unlikely to do very well. Okay? Because that method was written in January or February. We're now sitting in July. So your method will be longer. Okay? Sample size is appropriate and adequate. Now, if you're doing surveys, you've got to have a lot of them for the regional. You might have had a few for the district expo. Now we're looking at probably 100 per grade if you are doing a survey at school. Right. How did you collect information? Point 6. Was it appropriate? Okay. Did you ask the right kinds of questions, justified the right kinds of questions at school, in the school questionnaire? Okay. The pre-test and post-tests are being done in an educational social science project. Please ask your teacher to help you with pre and post tests. By the way, those also have to be anonymous. So you can't say Olga Peel got 10 out of 100. You've got to say student 1 got 10 out of 100. Okay, before, and 20 out of 100 after, or something like that. So be very careful that all of this is about anonymity, because it's not about the person who answered your survey or the person who did the interview. It's about the content of the interview, the content of the survey. Okay, so if you're doing a survey, then they're questionnaires, or you can do interviews. But be absolutely sure that you do have in your method how you collected information. Let's look at point 7. So this is unique, obviously, to the social science project. Ethics. There's informed consent, which means people gave permission, people over 18, by the way, gave permission for you to ask them questions. If they are 18 and under, they would either get permission from the principal if the survey was done at school. If you did it outside the school, each parent would have given permission for the survey, or the guardian. So the ethics on the judging sheet correlates to this ethics. And please be careful, because if you don't address this, it looks like you didn't bother. Remember, confidentiality is vital to a social science project. No identities, names, photographs, or personal details should be anywhere. It's possible that they were in the survey questionnaire in the appendix file, but they may not be in the project itself, because you're looking at information and data. You're not looking at who did it. Right, so the results. Now you can see we're drawing into what you've done since the District Expo, or from before the District Expo. The results report on the most important information in tables, graphs, interview records, and so on. You are going to use these in pieces of information to identify patterns in the analysis of your results. And I'll show you some examples just now. But remember, and that's why I've highlighted it in yellow, remember that everything refers back to the aim, the research question, and the hypothesis. So don't lose sight of this. For example, if you did a project on whether learners learn better, whether they're when the desks are in rows or whether they're in groups, then that's what the whole project is about. You can't now start answering putting questions on gender-based violence in, because it's not part of your project. Okay, and tables and figures, graphs, sketches, and diagrams are used to represent the data, and of course, the records of the interviews are anonymous. Right, this just shows you how important the results are, that they link to the aim, the research question, the hypothesis, and the variables. So they're not a standalone part of anything. In fact, the whole report is continuous. Each subsection refers to the subsection before and after. Okay, Now, the 28 marks, the big one, okay? So the data from the questionnaires, surveys, interviews, tests, the pre and post tests are represented accurately. You're going to put an example of the test before, the test after, or the survey questionnaire, and then the results are shown in tables or graphs and so on. Now, please make sure you use Excel to generate the graphs, which means the tables are going into Excel as well. Obviously, after the graphs, then there's some analysis of the data, and I'll show you some more. In 10 and 11 is more about the discussion. Okay, so we finished the results. Now we're looking at the discussion. The patterns, things you notice that are either outside, like an outlier, or very much part of the pattern. They're identified and discussed. And remember to refer back to the aim. The discussion is a long set of writing. Make it bullet points, please, not paragraphs. It must be easy for somebody else to read. Please explain why your results are so important. Remember, it's your project. You are the expert on this project. None of us knows as much as you, and you must explain that in your discussion. Also, there's some more marks here. Cites literature. In other words, you refer back to the literature you used in your introduction, and you can use that literature again in your discussion and compare your results to other people's results. But remember to reference their work. Then there is a section called limitations and errors. In other words, you are saying where you came short, and I'll show you later, and also where you can extend your project. Judges really like to see this because they like to know that this project isn't at a dead end. They actually want to know that this project could be ongoing. And then lastly, point number 14 is about the conclusion. So you are answering the research question, accepting or rejecting the hypothesis. Correctly stated, conclusion is correct, means correctly stated. And therefore, in point number 14, you will also justify using the most important results. And I'll show you more. Okay, I'm talking about qualitative results as opposed to quantitative. So this is this first line, 2 lines is actually from the judging sheet, the assessment sheet. So how would you record and describe the qualitative results, for example, the interviews you did, while keeping the names of the peoples out, while keeping it anonymous? This is a time that you can actually take that whole recorded interview, obviously in text version, put it in inverted commas or quotation marks into your results. Because you can say, this was the actual interview I did with person A or scientist 1 or whoever. Make sure, though, at the very end you reference them correctly because it's an interview, because they're giving you some information. So they mustn't be left out of the reference list. Now, let's look at quantitative results. So I'm using some information from an old social science project, the use of same language subtitles and the effect on memory. So here's one of the tables that the girls did. You can see grid lines, in other words, columns and rows. Okay, you can also see the caption came below the table, but it could go above the table. Doesn't matter which one as long as it's there. Now, this would have been typed in Excel because it was going to be used to generate that graph. So in other words, it's quite important that you do learn Excel and you work in it. So there's no hand-drawn graphs, please. No grade will submit hand-drawn graphs. It must be generated electronically. You can also see how important the use of color is, especially for the poster. And there the figure 1 bar graph is shown below, but it can also be shown above, because I know life science teachers like their graph caption above. Okay. Now, if you are printing your graphs for your poster, they obviously have to be in color. But if you're printing them for your report, you might want to print them in color as well, unless you've got a way of showing the two bars differently. Okay? Because what judges do is they want to see that you can manipulate the information from the table, put it into the graph, and then, of course, you're going to analyze that information. Let's have a look at their analysis. You can actually put the results, the graph, and the analysis on one page, because that follows really nicely. So they referred back to table 1 and figure 1, and then they talked about they actually put the information into words. And that's what an analysis is, because they're actually saying, I'm looking at the 4th line, Group A, the group without subtitles, did better in section 2, which contained questions based on the visuals of the video. This suggests that subtitles do help in remembering the content of a video. So in other words, it's not just writing it out in words, it's starting to look at what that information means. Okay, there's another set of information that was created or changed into a pie graph. And as it says there, bar graphs and pie graphs are generally used in social science projects because the data is discontinuous. It's not like the temperature of a person over time, which would be a line graph. So also for a pie graph, the data must add up to 100%, which you can see I checked. In fact, I checked before I put this on, I checked that the data added up to 100%. So in actual fact, pie graphs are also very useful to show relationships between things. And here's the pie graph of the column B, and you can see immediately the analysis is there. Right, now let's look at some of the discussion. The discussion is the place where it's going to be the bulk of the write-up of the report. You can expect the judges to ask you a lot of questions about your discussion, especially you must write it. Remember, I said, don't be tempted to use AI. It's a highlighting of the important results. Do you understand your results? Because you know, a judge could ask you that. You look at the patterns and explain them. You look at maybe you made some assumptions that could or be right or wrong. It really is the place where you compare your results to work done by others. You could also put relevant literature in. Don't forget to reference work done by other people. And make sure it links to the hypothesis and the conclusion. Remember, we said everything links to the social science type of project, but also to your topic. Let's have a look at limitations and errors and future extensions. So I've just put some questions in because this is so relevant to the project, what you did, and so on. So here are some questions. Was your questionnaire comprehensive enough? Did you actually get enough information from that questionnaire? Did you do enough surveys and interviews? Maybe you only did 20 surveys. Okay, that's hardly going to give you conclusive results. Did you need to learn more about Excel? You can put that here. A judge will say, I'm glad you recognized that you still need to learn more about Excel. That's fine, because judges look here for your honesty. If you had more time, what else could you do? Okay, for example, you only surveyed grade 8 and 9, and now you want to survey grade 6 and 7, or grade 10 and 11. So that's the kind of thing that you'd like to do. And also, what would you do differently in future? Now, also from your limitations and errors, did you need to change your timeline? That's actually relevant to 2026, but it's still something that you can say, I didn't give myself enough time to finish the project before the district expo. And I'm sure you're going to say that because a lot of people's projects were not finished by the district expo. Then came the exams, and I don't know when they've been working on their projects since then. So those are the kind of things you can say. Now, future extensions is very much what would you do differently. If you had more time, what else can you do? If your project's selected to go to ISF, the International Science Fair, in the October holidays, that's the round 3 of this competition. Of course, you can address a lot of these to make your questionnaire more comprehensive, to make more surveys and interviews, to learn about Excel and so on. And by the way, these are just a few questions, not all that you might have. Please be honest, though, in your limitations and errors and your future extensions. Please, I remember a child saying to me, there are no errors in my project. Of course, what did I do as a judge? I looked for the errors because you can't state that. We know that you had limitations. This year's school calendar, for example, was a limitation. Right, let's go to the conclusion. Now, a conclusion is a paragraph or two. It's not a short 2-line thing that you might have written for the district expo. This is quite a big section. It refers back to the aim and the hypothesis and to the discussion. It links the whole project together. The hypothesis can be supported, or if you use the word accepted, that's fine, or rejected. By the way, the judges don't mind if your hypothesis is rejected. Don't call it wrong, because sometimes you only find out right at the end of your surveys or your pre and post tests or your interviews that in actual fact the hypothesis that you wrote is wrong. The results don't support it. It doesn't matter. You can still have a rejected hypothesis, but you must, that second last bullet, you must use your most important findings there, whether they are to back the hypothesis that was supported or to give the reason why the hypothesis was rejected. Okay, acknowledgements. Now, everybody gets help. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm sure Einstein even got help with his E equals mc squared. Okay? You please list them in the report and on the poster. So it's part of both. You can make a list or a table showing who you got the advice or help from and what they gave you. Thank you to my mother for driving me to the clinic so I could hand out the questionnaires. Thank you for the so-and-so teacher who assisted me with giving out the questionnaires at school. Thank you to the principal for supporting my project. Thank you for the clinic sister who agreed to help me hand out anonymous survey questionnaires, and so on. The order of the people in the acknowledgements list could be alphabetical, or it could be in order of importance. And please include your teachers. A lot of learners forget that the teachers are the ones who are helping get that project done. Okay, this is still on the assessment sheet. This is also done during pre-judging. Now, I found point 15, 16, and 17 is where the marks are given for the top projects. The high marks are given for the top projects. No ethical violations. The last thing you want is to forget to have the permission letter or the supervision letter, because you will get nothing. Okay? If there's plagiarism in 4 places, you'll get nothing. Okay, if you've copied images that so obviously aren't yours, you'll get, if there are 4 of them, you get nothing. So please make sure that there are no ethical issues at all. Now, you're going to show that you know more than what you could have done at school. Some of the judges are teachers. Most of the judges are people who know what's happening at school. So you have to make sure that, especially in 16 and 17, those go into your discussion and you make sure that it's quite clear that your project is outside the scope of what's taught in LO at school. And also, your work is new, it's novel, it's innovative. You can do this in a social science project as well. Okay, so let's make sure that you're getting 12 out of 12 there. Now, there are 4 and 4 marks for the actual formatting of the project. Your references are correct in the text and in the reference list section at the end. That gives you 4. If you don't use in-text referencing, you can't get 4 out of 4. Okay, and then just looking at the formatting and writing and clear and logical order, you get another 4. That's why you need a contents page. Then you get another 4. Okay, let me just briefly refer to referencing. At the top, this is from the Expo guidebook. It actually tells you why you should reference. And I think it's very clear to us. But learners also need to be absolutely sure that whatever work is not their own is referenced correctly. And then, as I said, there's in-text referencing, and it shows you at the bottom there what it means, and the reference list at the end of the report. So please make sure that everything you got from somebody else, including the interviews, is referenced correctly. Remember AI referencing as well? Okay, the poster. It's a visual summary of the project. So visual. Remember, the abstract was a text-based summary. This is a visual summary showing the key stages of the project, the most important stages. You do it like a week or 2 before Expo using the template that we provide. I'll show you where to go. And please only include your own work. Now, if you take photos, remember, we don't take photos of people. Look at that in blue there. The Poppy Act, no photos of people on the poster. Please make sure if you put a photo on the poster, you say photo taken by and your name or names. Okay, and that means you obviously didn't take it from the internet. The poster is printed in color. So this is the time you use color, but I'll show you what else you can do. And it can be laminated. The poster board dimensions are given there. Okay, height 1 meter, central area another meter wide, so it's a meter squared, 2 side flaps of 50 centimeters, and there will be a unique project number and the Expo logo, and don't put anything over them, please. Here's the poster design. Okay, this is a suggested layout, but basically the poster starts top left and ends bottom right. So we go in a logical order. Let's look at this poster at 17 landscape pages last year, and you can actually see how nicely it's set out. Now, teachers, unfortunately, we can't lend the poster boards, the white ones. We've had problems never getting them back in the past or getting them back in a damaged state. But you could lay out on a table or the lab benches that size and then get the learners to put their poster pages out flat. Remember, the project title and the names don't have to be A4, they can be slightly longer. Put the pages out and have a look at it. Take a photo of your pages, learners. Number the pages at the back so it's easy to stick it up on the day that you put your poster up. Let's have another look. Here's a different social science project. No photos, but graphs. Do you see that they also put a blue outline around their A4 page? That was to help the photo become more striking, the poster to become more striking. I also see a box on the bottom right here on the table. I reckon that's all the survey questionnaires. and part of the project. This was about music, so they've got a tiny little piano and a small drum there to help give the atmosphere. But a social science project doesn't have to have too many of the props because it's very much about the human behavior that you looked at. Notice how colorful the graphs are. Okay, the last 16 marks are the interview, sorry, the last 24 marks, my apologies. I will change that. The last 24 marks are the interview section. So the judges will do this with you. Okay. They will actually be asking you questions on quite a lot of this. So let's have a look at it. Understands the concepts, theories, and principles relate to your project. Use the post to explain and discuss your project. So when you're being interviewed, actually go and look at the poster. Draw the judge's attention to the graph or to some specific results. Then it says, point 22, answers judges' questions on the project content. So the judge has read your project. They want to know more. Remember, it says shows authenticity. They're going to ask you the kinds of questions that you only can answer. Remember, I said you're the expert in your project. It also gives marks here for the limitations. So you wrote those limitations, you must know them. Okay. And then you must explain how important your research is. That's why I said, who are you going to share this research with? Now, there are 4 marks for the actual setting out of the poster, and there are 4 marks for the journal. Those two, points 24 and 25, you must aim for full marks. So let's just go a little bit more about the interviews. Please prepare for the interview, but no prepared speeches. This isn't a speech competition or public speaking or debating. Okay, go through the mark sheet out of 24 and use scientific language. Make sure that you can answer the questions really well. Remember your project type, social sciences. Remember your category, mostly social sciences. So your interview could be about how the humans behave, what society issues you covered. If you are in pairs, make sure you know the whole project, please. Don't do half each. That doesn't work with judges. They need both of you to know the project. Now, one of the best ways to prepare is to ask and answer your own questions, to sit down. So this is about 2 weeks before the expo, or a week before if you're going to cut it a bit fine. Sit down and make a list of every single question you think the judge might ask you, and then have an answer ready, because that is one of the best ways to prepare. And lastly, ask your friends, parents, and teachers to interview you. There is nothing like getting your friends who are giggling and chatting. You have to stay on the topic. Your parents, of course, who love you to bits, they might be very kind. Stay on the topic. Your teachers might be a little bit more like judges. Stay on the topic, and please switch off your phone. The last thing you want is your phone to ring during your interview. Your marks are going to be very, very low. Okay, here's Yumi from last year with her beautiful social science project that went to ISF. So the board's a bit bigger at ISF. You see how she's in school uniform on the interview day. You must be dressed in school uniform, please. You can see her documents are on the table. Here's Darakshan. She's also got everything beautifully laid out on her project, ready for the interview. Okay, just the last few slides. So if you don't know where the templates are, please go to exposcience.co.za, get involved, resources, and then you'll find all of the templates. Research plans, reports, abstract, posters. There's a PowerPoint there that you can use and will obviously generate landscape pages. You don't even have to worry about the size of the page because the PowerPoint will simply be landscape pages. Don't do back to back, obviously. Also, the learner ethics checklist is also there. Go to documents to guide you on your project, scroll down and find the learner ethics checklist, especially if you want a new one. There is a guide on referencing in Expo projects. Just go there and find it. Now, the assessment sheets are not in the same place. They're actually in Get Involved Judges. So you go to exposcience.co.za and you can download all of the assessment sheets. Obviously, I'm talking about the social sciences assessment sheet. And as I said, please use the assessment sheet as a guide to writing your report. Right, everybody, thank you very much for attending this afternoon. I know already how busy schools are. Please ask questions to your regional science fair director or your provincial coordinator, Lyndon Manas, and good luck with finishing those projects off. We look forward so much to seeing them at the regional expos. Goodbye. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Olga.